What is up, everybody? I'm No Lux Given here with your afternoon snap, and today I am taking a comprehensive look at the newest card added to the game, Kang the Conqueror. This is going to be a full exploration, a little bit longer than my typical videos. I'm going to look at almost 30 games, and we're going to look at the full spectrum here, from the games where Kang is at its best to the games where Kang is maybe a little bit of a liability. And we're starting off strong here with, I think, one of the better examples for Kang. Firstly, Kang allows me to snap. I'll talk more about that in just a second, but that is an extremely powerful part of what Kang can do. The other thing that Kang can do, though, of course, is see a little bit into the future and check what options your opponent has at their disposal. And this game's actually going pretty well for us. It might not look it at first, but Spider-Man on the penultimate turn means that we should be able to win in Mojo World, and we should tie on Rickety Bridge with everything getting blown up there, and then we'll win the game on differential. So that's the plan. However, there are a few weird ways to disrupt it. If my opponent is able to summon anything into Mojo World with like White Tiger or even Squirrel Girl, well, we could be in trouble. And then Arrow would also be a really powerful option that basically every deck plays. You're going to hear me talk about Arrow a lot throughout this video. That is one of the main things that Kang is looking to dodge. And in this one, Arrow could be really bad. That would move everything that we play into the Rickety Bridge and either destroy it, or if we play Armor, then everything's just moving there and we lose the other two locations because my opponent is currently winning those locations. So there's definitely some ways to lose this game. However, Mystique plus Agent Coulson isn't really one of them. So Kang lets me know here that the coast is clear and that I should be able to get a win. On the second turn 6, my opponent winds up making a slightly different play, but still no Arrow. And that was the important thing that I wanted to check out with Kang, so we are going to be able to win the game on differential. As you could see in that last game, when Kang resets the turn, he also resets all snaps, which means it's basically free to snap the turn that you play Kang. Worst case scenario, most of the time, this just means absolutely nothing. But sometimes, it's enough to scare your opponent into retreating, even when you have nothing, in examples like these ones right here. And this is just really good across the board, though I do think it's especially effective in Galactus lists because those decks typically aren't winning games for 4 or 8 cubes. You're just trying to slowly grind your way 1 and 2 cubes at a time. This game is also a bluff, but I wanted to highlight it specifically. It looks to be a Galactus mirror matchup, and we have Galactus, but I don't know if my opponent has Galactus, and they have priority. It's very important to note here that you want to play Kang into the lane that Galactus would get played in, and that explains some of my other Kang plays earlier as well. Galactus can destroy Kang if your opponent has priority, so that is definitely something to be mindful of. After I drop the Kang, I will snap, and my opponent, not having Galactus, is going to retreat. Here, I'd like to play Galactus, but I don't want to get arrowed, and my opponent has it, so this is a little bit tricky. However, what I've been realizing in playing a bunch with Kang is oftentimes once your opponent has showed you that they have the answer, then they're expecting you to do something different, and they're also going to wind up doing something different accordingly. So I just decided to risk it and throw out Galactus here on turn 5, see if my opponent goes for it again. Now, part of the idea with my opponent is that this turn they could play Mystique, and then if I'm afraid to play Galactus, then they could try to arrow me again next turn. However, we're just going to wind up playing Galactus and getting the win. And in this game, I had priority going into my Galactus turn, so I didn't need to Kang on this turn. I knew the coast was clear. However, we haven't quite won this game just yet, as my opponent also had to play 2 Avengers Compound this turn, and that was also part of the reason that I knew that I was safe. But where do we go from here? Do I just play Destroyer? What if my opponent has Shang-Chi? So I want to see, first off, if my opponent has Shang-Chi, so I drop Kang, and they do. So now again, we get into a little bit of mind games. Could I just play Professor X and then I beat Shang-Chi? It's definitely a good option. Or, now having showed me the Shang-Chi, is my opponent expecting me to play around it, so then they're just going to play something big that would then be able to beat my Professor X. So that's what I'm hoping for here when I just decide to drop the Destroyer. Let's see how it goes. My Destroyer flips first and my opponent's card is Thanos. So we walk away with the win. This game is really tough. We can't play Galactus into the big house, and I waved into Atlantis to try to grab priority. My opponent had Brood into Muir Island, so I'm not able to get priority, but I am still able to activate Galactus here. Didn't think it was worth it to use the Kang just yet. But what I can do now is Kang to see if I should Spider-Man or Hobgoblin. I think I need to Hobgoblin here because I'm not going to have enough power if I just play Spider-Man. My opponent has a bunch of power from these Broodlings. So I play Kang on turn 5 and snap when I do so, and this is just going to let me see one of my opponent's options to let me know if they have something that they think is worth it to play on turn 5 here, and they do. They have Silver Surfer. It just makes sense to play it now, so that way they get a few additional hits off of Muir Island. So Kang lets me know what's up. I don't want to play Hobgoblin. I'm just going to play Spider-Man, lock my opponent into that play, but I really don't have any way to win this game still. However, like I said, sometimes your opponents will change their plays, and it's actually exactly what we're going to see here. My opponent plays Cosmo instead, which opens up the door for me to draw Destroyer and steal the win. And this one is super close. I had to do this math a few times, but Destroyer will get me up to 23, and then at the end of the turn, Muir Island will make the score 26-23. I also decide to do what I think is a double bluff in this scenario, where I basically snap to pretend that I'm bluffing here. Because I don't think that you would normally snap in this situation where your opponent can't play any cards unless you wanted them to retreat. So here, I'm snapping to make my opponent think that I want them to retreat when I actually just want some more cubes. I'm currently free to play in Marvel Snap, but if this video gets 500 likes, I'll buy Nimrod, the next season pass card, so that way I can showcase it here on the channel. Hit that like button and subscribe to see more. Here's another game with Kang as an information scout of sorts. We're gonna get to see what my opponent is doing with all of these random cards. They're actually playing a Wong Hazmat deck with Gambit as a potential option as well. And we get to see what Gambit discards, so that's a little bit more information. Now, of course, my opponent isn't locked into making this same play, and they probably won't, but we do get a little bit of an idea of their mindset, what they're thinking going into this turn. It looks like they're not planning on messing around with Titania in Mojo World, so we do have a way to potentially steal a win here. It's going to be a little bit tight, but Atuma should be able to take it in the miniaturized lab. My opponent didn't play anything too big, and then we can play Armor or something to try to steal Titania from my opponent and potentially win in Mojo World as well. So I'm going to give it a shot. It's probably a little bit of a long shot, but it's basically all that I can do. So let's go for it. Let's see what happens, and my opponent plays a slightly different play, but one that still gets us the win. The next level play against Kang is to not play anything at all, so that way you don't give out any information. And I think that we may see some people tactfully use that in the future in Marvel Snap, and I wasn't sure if I would be able to include anything like that in this video. And then I played against Sunspot a few times, which is a definite reason to just pass the turn. So that's what we're going to wind up seeing here as we drop Kang on turn 4, and my opponent just puts all of their energy into Sunspot and doesn't let me know anything that they're doing. But this is still info enough. The game crashes, by the way, but this still makes me feel confident enough, especially with the turn 4 Galactus. We're going to be able to play around Arrow and other effects like that, that we should be able to get the win here. So I'm going to drop Galactus in this new timeline. This game's going pretty well for me, with Green Goblin allowing us to win in Bar Sinister, and then Electro giving us a little bit of ramp. And we could just play Galactus into Necrotia or something, but then we won't be able to make use of the lane that we've already won. So I don't really want to just blow up Bar Sinister, and maybe I don't have to. With Shuri, my opponent is pretty heavily incentivized to just pass here. They may have She-Hulk, they definitely have Sunspot, and if they Shuri in the wrong location and then we Galactus elsewhere, well, then they're probably not looking so hot for the end game. So I am going to Kang to just test the waters, though I do think we could probably just play Professor X into Necrosha and win. It will be nice to just have a little bit more information, and again, the lack of information can still be information here. So I'm going to snap and throw Kang out. We'll see if it's enough. We do have priority as well, so that is definitely nice to note. But let's see if my opponent passes or decides to play a big character this turn. They're going to pass. So I think that we will be clear to just drop the Professor X. A lot of times players will mix it up after a Kang turn, but like I said, they do have a lot of incentive to just pass here, so I think Professor X should be able to steal the win. I Professor and snap, and they play nothing, which means we win. And this game's a little bit different. We don't get any info from Kang because my opponent played to the Dark Dimension. And while that isn't necessarily info that we can act on with 100% confidence, it is still info. My opponent has won the center location because they played Captain Marvel there to meet my Professor X, and now they just have to win one more location. And it doesn't really make that much sense for them to play into Necrosha where they're already losing by 5. So instead, my opponent is probably going to just continue to play Dark Dimension, and they don't really have a huge incentive to change their plan because we didn't actually see what they did last turn. So we are able to win Dark Dimension and Necrosha with Destroyer, and Captain Marvel is locked into Olympia. Kang can also be used nicely to conceal what you are trying to do. My opponent snaps here, but that's okay because we're playing Kang, so we don't really have to worry about what they have. We should be all right. And it turns out they also just have Kang. So we're just going to trade Kangs. This is probably going to be a pretty common occurrence, but if there's a lot of Kangs out there, it could be nice to be running some Kangs yourself, so that way you don't give out any more info to your opponents. So I try to bait my opponent into snapping again here going into the finals because they don't know that we've got Wolverine for the Rickety Bridge. I don't want to play armor over there because I don't want to protect my opponent's cards as well. I'm just going to play Wolverine. They probably won't play to the Rickety Bridge, or if they do, maybe there's a chance that Wolverine will resummon into that same location. We are going to dodge the Shang-Chi out of my opponent's Lockjaw, and then Wolverine will win the Rickety Bridge, while Destroyer stays strong in Warrior Falls. This game I maybe got a little bit cocky and thought I was too good for Kang, but I'm going to use Professor X to win Nowhere, and then the idea is I can play Spider-Man on turn 5 into the Strange Academy. Everything will move into Sanctum Sanctorum, and I'll be the only person allowed to play into that first location on the final turn of the game. So, seemed pretty good, and I didn't want to give my opponent more time to think about my potential plays, so I didn't play Kang this turn. And I was thinking, well, if I play Kang, then maybe that will make them think about retreating next turn, whereas if I just play Spider-Man, I can maybe just get him good and get the win. So that was kind of my thought process. However, my opponent had Kang, so now they know I'm going to Spider-Man them, and they'll just be able to retreat rather than losing more cubes. If I had played Kang, it would have concealed the Spider-Man play, and then I would have probably won the game. So yeah, probably just gonna play Kang from now on. Here's another one where I kind of just don't trust Kang, or more don't trust my opponent, but if they were to make these exact same plays, we could win the game with a Tuma into Lemuria. I'm just not convinced they're gonna do that, so instead of risking it, I just retreat. There's another Kang mechanic that I wanted to showcase in this game. This is also a fun game. It looks to be a Galactus mirror match with Central Park as one of the locations, so neither one of us can Galactus. Now we're both going to try to lock each other out of Avengers compound. Me with Spider-Man, my opponent with Dr. Octopus. Luckily for us, that's going to drag out in a Tuma and also a Destroyer, so we will still be able to play to the compound this turn. and we'll be winning that location. So we're in a pretty good spot. I'm just going to Professor X in the compound on turn 5. In turn 6, we're going to draw Kang, and that is the other mechanic that I wanted to talk about. And yeah, my opponent just retreated for this game. Here we've got 4 cards in our hand, and then we draw Kang as our draw for the turn. And that is kind of the hidden mechanic of Kang, is that if you play it on the turn that you draw it, you actually get to draw 1 card deeper into your deck. This game, Kang isn't going to do anything. It's going to conceal our play, I suppose, but it is also going to draw us 1 card deeper into our deck, as now on the reset, you'll see that we've drawn Wave here. So that's kind of a cool part of Kang, especially in combo decks that are looking to draw specific cards, and in ramp decks, where Electro and Wave give us more potential turns to draw Kang and play it on the same turn. There is one other Kang mechanic that I wanted to talk about, and that is RNG, randomness in Marvel Snap. If players make the exact same decisions in the post-Kang timeline, you're going to get the same result. So Lockjaw is going to spit out the same cards, and Reality Stone will change the location into the same new location, and any other random effects will continue to be the same. However, if you make different decisions, you will get different random results. We're going to take a look at an example of that here now with Grand Central Station. That'll put a random card there for each player at the end of each turn, and this actually could have a pretty high impact on the game because I actually don't want to Galactus here. We're winning on Nowhere, we're ahead on Isle of Silence, so I'd rather not blow those locations up and have Galactus randomly spawn there. So going to play Kang and see if that is what happens. My opponent also plays a Kang, so our plays are still concealed here. And then we actually do wind up dragging Galactus out. So I will want to avoid that and avoid a potential loss on that front. So I'm going to now play a card to Grand Central just to stop my Galactus from activating. And I can play 2 cards this turn. My Electro is silenced, so I'll also be able to play a Spider-Man into the center location and win that location because of that. So pretty straightforward game, but you'll see that Galactus being the first card in my hand, like it's not like Grand Central is always taking the first card in my hand, it's just taking a random card. And we're actually going to see my Professor X be what is dragged into the Grand Central Station this turn. Spider-Man will lock up the Isle of Silence, so this is a locked open and shut case. This game's won, and Professor X is going to shore up any loose ends here because it will mean that despite my opponent pulling the Space Stone, they won't be able to move out of Grand Central on this final turn, and we'll get the win. So this is like the turning point in the video. We've been talking about all of the cool stuff that Kang can do, and now we're gonna get into some of the drawbacks. But first, here's 2 games where Kang just literally did nothing. I drew him on the final turn, I was already going to win, and my opponent just retreated and it didn't matter. In this drawback section, I'll talk about some of the ways that Kang can get countered. One of them, of course, being Galactus, so that way it never gets to reveal, plus priority. Cosmo can also do it too to stop on reveal abilities, and then maybe some weird things like Reality Stone into Nowhere could also stop Kang. So I haven't really been showing you guys these games in the order that I played them, just in order that kind of makes sense narratively, but this is one of the first games that I played with Kang, and it taught me very early that your opponent isn't always going to make the same decisions that they make during the Kang turn. We're doing okay this game if we can land a Galactus into the Bifrost, but I was afraid of Arrow, so I just decided to play Kang on turn 5, and now I know that my opponent has Arrow, and I probably don't want to go for Galactus, or at least, well, so I thought, but I was also kind of right, but well, you'll see. I'm gonna play Destroyer. That's like the deck's backup plan and allows me to dodge Arrow this turn, but instead my opponent actually has Kang. So now that I see that they're playing Kang, I probably should have switched back to Galactus and tried to win in the Bifrost, but instead it's like, what are they gonna do? What am I gonna do? I probably should have just gone based off of the information that I knew that they had of me, not based off the information that I had of them, because that could always change, especially once they see my Destroyer here. So definitely some silly stuff going on. I'm going to wind up still just making this Destroyer play, and instead my opponent leeches me on turn 5 and then plays a Space Stone into Shadowland, so that way they can win more into Mojo World. And part of the trick here is now they can just play that arrow that I was afraid of on turn 5 into Shadowland while they win Mojo World and Bifrost. In this game, I think I accidentally give away too much information with Kang. We're winning in Fisk Tower and we're losing in Sanctum Sanctorum. So really the only deciding factor for this game is who's going to get more power into the peak. So I'm going to peek at what my opponent is doing on turn 5 with Kang, and they play Leech, which doesn't seem super threatening. I can just Spider-Man there on turn 5 and win the location with Atuma. That's basically what I was already planning on doing, but now I'm pretty solidified in that. So Kang rewinds the turn and I immediately snap, but I think that this kind of gives away my confidence and gives away the fact that Leech maybe isn't the best play. So now my opponent, knowing that, is going to change their play to drop a Magneto. And now they've got more power than me, and the only thing I can do is draw Destroyer, which I don't do. So I wind up losing this game. Well, let's see, would Destroyer have even won? No, Destroyer even loses here. So I really did not have too many options, and my opponent is going to get the win. They are going to spoil it a little bit by spamming some emotes. So I guess this was their first time making a good play, but what can you do? Kang can also be a little bit of a liability. That's what we're gonna see in this one when Dr. Octopus dumps out my hand, including Kang, which is kind of a bummer. I would have loved to just keep this turn as it is when we flip over a Destroyer and a Magneto. That's a lot of power, and now my opponent is more or less filled in Weird World. We should be able to win that location and the hub, which is nice. Space Stone is going to make it so that my opponent can easily win Sanctum Sanctorum, so we will have to battle for both of these other two locations, and we're gonna need all of the power we can get. We get a brief reset here, or a brief crash before we can reset from Kang, and awkwardly, I feel like I have to make the same play. I still want to play my She-Hulk into armor, because if I play Destroyer later, I don't want to blow up my She-Hulk. That would be a lot of power lost. So I'm going to make basically the same play, well, the exact same play, and my opponent is going to now put their cards over into the hub instead. So I'm still going to win the hub. I'll still have a huge power lead here. My opponent probably isn't catching up, even though they will be able to move one card out and bring one new card in. We just have a huge lead in this location, but they kind of consolidated all of my power, and now we're gonna actually struggle to win the Weird World. So I probably make a little bit of a mistake here. I was thinking Blue Marvel was total, or more overall total power, so that's why I went with it, just to shore up any loose ends, and I figured I'm playing Magneto next turn, and I'm gonna be spending all of my energy. What I should have done is played Sunspot and played around the cards in my own deck, as my opponent winds up dropping my own Professor X to clutch out the win. Plus Wolverine, that'll put them just over the edge, and I win in the hub, but I lose in the other two. To wrap things up, I wanted to talk about the main drawback of Kang, and that is that Kang limits your available options. When you play Kang on the turn that you draw it, you aren't really losing any options, but in a game like this, where Kang was in my opening hand, it significantly limited the amount of things that I could do this game. I wasn't able to draw and play any ramp, and then I really wasn't able to do anything basically throughout it. I'll play it on this final turn here, but I don't think this one's gonna be comebackable. Card draw is kind of interesting in Marvel Snap. Because you only have 6 turns to play all your cards, drawing more cards doesn't necessarily equate to more power, just more options. And when you have Kang in the opening hand, that really represents just having less options overall. What you're really doing with Kang in most games is trading options for information. And for the most part, that's not a worthwhile trade. Would you play a 0-cost, 0-powered card that just said, on reveal look at a random card in your opponent's hand? Not really. That's basically what Kang does a decent amount of the time. In this game, I rewind the turn, but I already kinda know what's happening. There's nothing I can do, so I'm still just gonna wind up retreating. And this game's really awkward. I wave out a Destroyer, but my opponent uses this opportunity to drop an Infinite. So I don't even bother with Kang, I just retreat. New Marvel Snap content every day, so subscribe if you want to see more. But for today, that's going to be it for me, so thank you very much for watching. I'm No Lex Given. Peace.